Glad to have everyone here and look forward to a very productive meeting. We will begin with the invocation by the Reverend James E. Park, retired Catholic Diocese of Richmond. And if you would stand for the invocation and remain standing after the invocation for the Pledge of Allegiance. Jim, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Our prayer. Gracious God, we give thanks this evening for each and every member of this, our city council. Continue to guide them as they seek to build a city that makes a difference in the lives of all its citizens. We thank you for a council that supports our first responders to make for an incredibly safe city. We thank you for a council that supports all citizens, such as we did yesterday, honoring all those who work with autism and their families. And indeed, we thank this council for supporting our many volunteers who offer their time and dedication to our city. And bless this council as it moves into major decisions for a budget. And give us all your love in this season of grace. Amen? Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You've got the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do I have a motion for the certification of the closed session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 10-0, you have approved you certified the closed session to be in accordance with the motion to recess.
Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the informal and formal sessions of March 6, 2018 and March 20th, 2018?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Any discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 9-0 with Mrs. Abbott abstaining, you have approved the minutes as submitted.
I'll open a public hearing on the lease of city property, Farmers Market Building 2, Space 12, to the Country Butcher Shop.
No speakers, sir.
I'll close that public hearing. I will now, in council, you will note that some of the things that we had on consider have now been pulled. We have a couple of speakers, so please note as the Vice Mayor reads it, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval under the consent agenda, first under ordinances and resolutions. Item 1A, which is ordinance to amend City Code Sections 2-452.1, Ray Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board members filing of disclosure statements. B1B, paragraph 13-4 and 13-60, Ray extension of time of a food service manager's certificate and change the permit fee for a food service establishment. Madam Clerk, please note that Mr. Moss and Ms. Abbott are voting no on that item.
Yes, sir.
Item 1C and 1D are for deferral, indefinite deferral at the request of the Health Department. For approval, item 2, ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a lease for up to 5 years at the Virginia Beach Farmers Market to the Country Butcher Shop, Building 2, Space 3, ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2017-18 excuse me, operating budget of the Housing and Neighborhood Preservation Ray adjustments in alignment with allocations to certain administered federal programs. 4, ordinance to adopt the 2018 Housing Choice Voucher Annual Agency Plan, including a revised administrative plan, and authorize city manager to execute and submit the plans to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have a speaker on item 5. Item 6, resolution to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and recognize the season of nonviolence. Item 7, ordinance to authorize temporary encroachments into a portion of city property known as Treasure Canal, reconstruct a bulkhead, pier, ramp, and boat lift at the rear of 2401 Spindrift Road in the Lynn Haven District. Item 8, resolution to authorize a grant of $3,800 to Tide Swimming, Inc., Ray Blue Zone Initiative. Item 9, ordinances to appropriate $721,075 from the fund balance of tourism advertising program special revenue fund to the fiscal year 2017-18 operating budget of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Ray Advertising and Marketing efforts. 9B, $260,000 to provide an interest-free loan to Sandbridge Rescue and Fire, Inc., Ray purchase of a new ambulance. And C, $350,000 to provide an interest-free loan to Virginia Beach Rescue Squad, Inc., Ray purchase of new ambulances. Item 10, which is ordinances to accept and appropriate $17,048 from Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services to the Human Services Ray Community Corrections and Pretrial Programs. 10B is $24,109 in lieu of park reservation from Shelburne Manor Subdivision, Ray Park Playground Renovations 3. And Madam Clerk, please note that Mrs. Abbott and Mr. Moss are voting no on that item.
Yes, sir.
Also note, please, that the mayor is abstaining on that item.
Yes, sir.
And item C, which is $41,600 from the Supreme Court of Virginia to fiscal year 2017-18, operating budget of the Commonwealth Attorney, Ray Drug Treatment Court. Ordinance item 11, ordinance to transfer $1,058,079 from beach replenishment 2 to Chesapeake Restoration Ray Construction and provide for contingencies. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the question, please.
By a vote of 10-0, you have approved the consent agenda as read by the Vice Mayor.
I'd
I
like
don't-
to discuss my no vote if I could.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There was an item here which was increasing the fee for the permit for food service from $25 to $40. The basis of the ordinance, most of it was done to comply with state code, but the state code did not require the amount to go from 25 to 40, and the city manager affirmed that there was no requirement driving it to go to 25 to 40, other than the state code required it, and I thought going from $25 to $40 without a requirement shouldn't be approved.
Didn't it go for a longer period of time, though?
Yeah, but the point of it is, there isn't any more work required to approve one for 3 years than for 5 years.
All right, got it. Okay, thank you. And I go to item number 5, ordinance to designate certain city council appointees to file a disclosure of their economic interests. This is on consent. Do we have speakers?
Yes, one, Diana Howard.
Diana, we're glad to have you here today.
Good evening, everyone. Now, I asked to speak on this, even though I approve of them having to, file a disclosure of economic interest. But it said certain city council appointees, and I'm assuming that's, just going to be the ones that actually spend taxpayer money, like Virginia Beach Development Authority, and not other ones that may be volunteering for, like helping the fire squad or something, right? So, we had the auditor at our last meeting, and he was talking about the bid process, and he had investigated both of them, but he didn't investigate the VBDA because apparently, he said, because they already have a disclosure of economic interest, and they would be in violation of a conflict of interest, and they would be held accountable for that. So that really isn't the case, because we already know one person has violated it 3 times that we know of. So is there anything in this ordinance that is going to address that? Make sure that, they don't violate their conflict. When they do, they're counseled on it. And if they continue it, they're removed or anything like that. Because when that happened the last time, I had asked you all, and you all said you had no ability to do anything about the VBDA. You only appoint them, you give them all money, they do what they want with it, and if they violate it, you can't pull them, you can't, counsel them or anything like that. Even the city manager said he can't do anything. So that's what I wanted to know. Is there anything in there to do anything about that, track it, whatever? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 10-0, you've approved the resolution.
I'm opening a public hearing for planning for item number 1, Argos Properties 2 LLC. This was to be on consent for a deferral, and I gather we have a speaker.
Yes, do you want to hear from the applicant's representative first, Mr. Martin?
I guess so.
Okay, questions only for him.
Okay.
So, Joe Brown,
We welcome you tonight, sir.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As she said, my name is Joe Brown. I'm representing my parents, who are homeowners in the Princess Anne Quarter neighborhood, as well as representing the Civic League of the neighborhood. I'm requesting you to deny the deferral and vote against the application tonight filed by Argos Properties for a change of zoning on the north side of Princess Anne Road. This matter was brought before the Virginia Beach Planning Commission on February 14th, and the commission heard comments from the owner's representative and from numerous opponents, and the commission voted to deny this application. The following summarizes some points made during the Planning Council session. The owner's representative, Ms. Ann Crenshaw of Kaufman and Knowles, stated that she is aware of the significant concern of flooding in the proposed area. She proposed making a change to the housing document potential owners will review that will be in bold print and will include buyer beware language, warning of the potential for flooding and lack of ingress egress to the neighborhood. We believe that this acknowledgement in itself should be enough to persuade the City Council to deny this application. The ingress egress to the potential neighborhood is unavoidably in the floodplain, directly impacting emergency vehicle access during inclement weather. Use of this property may adversely affect Back Bay due to runoff during and after construction, which will flow into West Neck Creek, further making it unsuitable for development. The existing pumping station that would support this neighborhood is already significantly over capacity, requiring an upgrade that has been approved by the city. Adding this neighborhood may put the pumping station back at or over capacity after the upgrade. As current residents of Princess Anne Quarter, we can attest from personal experience that Princess Anne Road floods much more often than the 100-year storm cited by the owner's representative. Not only does the road flood often, the area in question is rarely dry because it is a wetlands area. Many residents moved to this area of the city to capture a more rural feeling. All of the construction already approved is diminishing the quality of life for those residents. Poor decisions made by prior city councils have directly affected residents' quality of life by allowing neighborhoods to be built in areas that constantly flood, such as Windsor Woods. Now the city is forced to spend millions trying to correct a flood problem in an area that should have never allowed building in the first place. The city council has an opportunity to prevent yet another flooded neighborhood. We're simply asking you to do the right thing. Now, the Planning Commission had the foresight to visit this area and see firsthand that it's surrounded by wetlands, and also had the foresight to deny this application to not make flooding even worse. One Planning Commission member said, "We need to be looking ahead to 50 years from now to what will happen. There has already been a study done that shows our areas are sinking, and we cannot continue to build in low places, specifically on a wetland next to West Neck Creek. This is zoned agricultural for a reason. It's not residential land. We need to be looking at the big picture and look into the future. And the fact is, the land is sinking and the water is rising." One Planning Commission member said, "I'm all about development, but this is not a good place for development." One Planning Commission member said that they had a friend who lives next to West Neck Creek and stated that slowly the water has been rising. the same planning commission member mentioned that in Windsor Oaks, where it was never good farmland because it is wetland, he bought and then he was rezoned to a flooded area, to a flood zone. Another planning commission member stated that it's a known issue that this road floods. One planning commission member said, and quote, "I won't approve something when in our mind, I know buyer beware with the safety of those who live there, and that the roadway that frequently floods prevents the safety of those citizens." So again, because of these said facts, I strongly urge you to back the Planning Commission and vote to deny this application and deny the deferral. What's the point of having a Planning Commission if the City Council can override something that they've motioned for? So again, I strongly urge you to deny the application tonight.
Thank you very much for coming down.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
Good evening. My name is Brad Martin. I'm with American Engineering. We are one of the agents for the applicant on this project. We have requested the deferral. We're happy to come back to you in, I think, about 45 or 60 days. I think we've asked for a June 5 deferral, and we'd like for that, for your agreement on that. So I'm not going to stand up here and disagree with a whole bunch of stuff that Mr. Brown said, but we would like for the deferral to get this project in order. We do have planning department's recommendation for approval. We obviously did get a recommendation for opposition at the Planning Commission, so we'd like to see this project forward.
Ms. Fennell?
If I could just ask you, what are you planning to do to change this so that it overcomes these problems?
That's a good question, and we don't totally agree that there are problems with this application. The elevation of Princess Anne Road is what it is. That is public infrastructure, and again, we're not going to disagree with the neighbors out there that sometimes Princess Anne Road is wet and inundated with stormwater. We are proposing a project, just some very quick details, on 50 acres of land. We have 38 acres of wetlands. We are proposing to develop 12 acres into about 32 lots, and we have shown total stormwater management. We've gotten the planning department and the public works to approve our stormwater management plan, that it is something that is feasible, and we're ready to take that through to the design, the full engineering design of that, and address those questions. This is a piece of property that's been in the family's ownership for over 60 years, and it is some high and dry land on those 12 acres. And we believe that a responsible development of 32 individual residential sites with the right stormwater management and the utilities that Mr. Brown spoke of being handled is an appropriate development on this property.
You say it's been in the, you mean Ms. Galiotos has owned it for 60 years? He's the applicant.
The original owner is Mr. Galiotis, who is deceased now, and his widow owned it for a while. She has recently deceased in the last year, and the 3 sons own it now. So the Galiotis family has owned it for over 60 years. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was looking at the deed. It didn't seem to be that. Okay.
Thank you.
I thank you, Mr.
Thank
Martin.
you.
That answers my questions. I had asked to make some comments when I thought it was going to be on the consent agenda for deferral, simply because we usually honor the applicant's request for a deferral, and I'll leave that up to the rest of the council. But I did want to make some comments, and particularly note the memo that we received in our packet on Friday, acknowledging to us that the BIM's projections substantiate what we're asking for with the 1.5-foot projected elevation and possibly 3 feet. And we are not overstating the issue. I think is very, very significant. When we did the Princess Anne Quarter East development 2 years ago, which is just the side of this development, adjoins it, I made some comments at that time that I felt kind of backed into a corner on that one because it did have recommended approval from both the staff and the Planning Commission, and there had been some agreements with the public utilities about cost participation with the vacuum system, which has to be put in that area because it's difficult to extend sewer with the gravity, and we have to therefore do a vacuum. And I was a little bit concerned when I was reading this transcript that there were apparently some negotiations with this group at that time as far as their cost participation as well, although according to the transcript, they had reneged on that. But I remember making comments when we had that one that, you know, I didn't feel good about approving that development because I know what the situation is in the area. I know the soil types, and in meeting with the folks in Princess Anne Quarters at that time who were there, and their comments about the ground not being, not drying well and going like this after it's been wet a while. I said, I absolutely know what you're talking about because of this soil type. And I think we don't look enough at soil type along with the water levels and the drainage and so forth. But you know, this is really Holland Swamp. And if you look at this deed, which is Exhibit A, I'm not sure when this, actually this says it was conveyed to Argos Properties in 2008. That's why I didn't think it was 60 years, but it goes back to this original deed, which is quite old, judging by the names here. But it says that it's lying east and north of the line of Moses Coffee to the center of the swamp, containing 55 acres. It's a swamp. And I really have difficulty continuing to approve building houses knowing that this is an area that maybe technically there's this knoll there that is above the level that's determined to be wetlands and so forth. But essentially, especially when we're looking at sea level rise and this knowledge that we are developing that these areas are going to be continually flooding in the next 20, 30, 50 years, I certainly want it to be beyond the time that somebody's mortgage is paid off before their property floods, and I'm not sure these would be. But then when we also know that even now, and I know that it's more than every now and then that road floods because I've seen it all my life. Every time there's a storm, or it doesn't even have to be too big, the houses around that area on Princess Anne Road have water right up to the doorsteps, and it's very hard to even think about continuing to allow new housing in an area that we know is going to flood and that we're projecting to possibly put in the homeowners association records that the entrance is probably going to be flooded and people wouldn't be able to get in and out. I just can't in good conscience even think that we should encourage the continued spending of money to try to make this acceptable, because I really, at this point, can't see anything that's going to change my mind, and I just wanted to make that statement. And if the proposed developer wants to continue spending money and you folks want to defer it, then that's certainly the call of the council. But I really cannot, in good conscience, at the same time we're going out with the budget, asking our people to allow us to raise their stormwater fee so that we can correct flooding in existing neighborhoods at the same time when we're also approving building more neighborhoods that we know are going to flood. That just doesn't work as far as I'm concerned. So those are my comments, and if someone else
Do you have a
has
motion?
things. Well, I would move that we deny the application.
I have a motion to deny. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Sounds like we got 2 seconds. Discussion?
When this is all done, however the vote goes, I need a better understanding of how the planning staff and the model can come to such a different recommendation from the planning commission.
And this is a pretty, I'm just need to better, not because I'm saying they can't come to a different judgment, but I'm trying to understand the science of the actual model that we're supposed to now be relying
That's the key right
upon.
there, is to understand.
I said, and we're getting these differences, sometimes it's the other way, so it's not like it's always one way or the other. But if there is a model that we have, and that we think that we should have confidence in that model because it has some proven reliability, which I know we don't have experience enough yet to give it that, but other places have, then somewhere along the line, we need to have a really good discussion, Mr. Mayor, on show me an example. Maybe this would be that example. And show me the parameters, and show me how the soil type, and show me all these things that comes back and said, you know, and take into account the future rise of property. Say, you know, this is a good decision that won't create the next, you name that subdivision, 10 years down the road, we're now spending 10 or $15 million to fix. And I'm just saying there's enough ambiguity there that says this, both things, I used to always say, can't occupy the same square of truth. So somewhere in here, we need to let the science show us what the right answer is.
Total agreement.
Yeah, thank you, and I agree that this is a problem that we have to take a serious look at. But the thing is, I think there's merits to a deferral at this time to allow that discussion to go forward. You know, we don't want to send a message to the development community, the people that do a lot of building throughout the city and, generate taxes and anything, that we're going to be closed to business. I think by a deferral will allow the opportunity for fruitful discussion and, to come up with a better process and a better way of doing things.
Ms. Rosemary?
I wanted to ask our legal counsel, with this being recommended in our agenda for a deferral, and that's the expectations of a deferral, and we really didn't even hear the application. If we deny this, is there any repercussions legally to come back to us?
Let me ask Kay, I think you have had a policy or at least a practice of granting deferrals, but I don't think there's any legal right to a deferral if council chooses to act. Would that be correct, Ms. Wilson?
If I may.
Yes, sir, Mr. Jones.
I've actually been out there when I was a kid hunting on this property. And it's a swamp. That's what it is. Plain and simple. I can remember falling into stump holes up to my knees in the waist on the property. So the bottom line is, Ms. Henley's right. This property is just too low to allow housing to be built on. So I'm going to support her motion.
Any other comments or questions before I call for the question? The motion, yes, ma'am.
I would just like to add, when I was a child, I used to take a kayak back there and get stuck all the time.
Touche.
You were a child a lot more recently than Louis and I were.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, the motion.
The motion is for denial.
Deny.
So by a vote of 5 to 5, the motion's denied.
Motion doesn't carry.
The motion does not carry.
That's correct.
Okay, we'll move on.
So does
Well,
that mean it's
you-
deferred or what?
You need some other motion.
Motion to defer?
Second.
Sorry, bear with me just a second.
Well, don't spend any more money if you can help it.
Okay, I've got a motion to defer.
Is
And
that
a
to a
second.
date certain?
No, it wasn't an emotion.
June 5th?
June 5th.
But if it's a 5-5 vote against the motion to defer, it's denied, is that correct?
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Should be an interesting
Then you're going to have it be in a peculiar situation where it's a carryover item to your next council meeting, I think is where you would be.
That's
Okay,
I
we
think
could
that's,
do
I
that.
think that's tabled. I think the appropriate thing then is tabled.
well, then let's table it.
Have we taken the vote?
I've got a question. I thought on a tie vote of a affirmative, when something was made for approval, a tie vote was lost.
That's right. So the motion to deny, the motion
to deny was not carried. But that's not a motion to approve. And it's
Okay.
not a motion to defer.
I would suggest we table this.
Well, the second vote, because we had a motion and a second.
But I don't think he officially called the vote, though. I mean,
Oh, we all pushed the button.
Vote's being taken.
It was 5-5 to motion to
We'll see you in
defer
2 weeks.
until June 5th.
So what does that result in, sir?
We defer it to the next meeting.
Okay, we're going to defer to the next meeting. But do I have a motion
Next
to
formal,
defer to the next meeting?
next formal meeting.
Next formal meeting. Do I have a motion?
I can vote for that.
I don't.
Yes, well, I think we have no choice, and we're not going to resolve it tonight. But I certainly don't want to defer it until June, and while we're going through this budget process. have-
Motion to defer till next meeting.
Second.
Table? Is it to the table?
Why?
Why? Okay, we just defer it.
Why? Why do we want to defer it to the next meeting?
I thought that's what
Get 'em-
he said we had.
Can't adjudicate it tonight.
That's budget time. That's,
Yeah,
when do
but-
we do anything? What if we do nothing?
That's what I'm saying. If you do nothing, I think technically the way it would work is you have unfinished business on every agenda. I think this would be unfinished business that would on its
That's
own
fine.
come back at the next meeting.
So our actions
Do nothing?
stands. It can come back to unfinished. It
Right.
can.
But
That-
I think this is important for not only the applicant, but the people who are interested in this, plus advertising requirements, I would think. Are we planning on hearing this then at the next meeting as a planning item?
I'd have to ask the district representative.
I don't think we can. I think we
Well,
have
I
to carry
think
this
we would-
unfinished business. and
Whatever the
advertise
city
it.
attorney says that we need to do we?
I think that we're gonna, I think the best practice would be for you to officially defer it until the very next meeting, because when you defer to a date certain, you do not have to re-advertise. So my recommendation to you is to effect that which would happen automatically, but to do so in a way that does not create an advertising problem. So I would encourage you to entertain a motion to defer until your next meeting.
I think Mr. Davenport made that a minute ago.
I'll second it.
Okay, is that correct? Is there any other discussion? I'll call for the question.
So we're deferring to the next.
Yeah,
Unfinished business and advertisement forever.
So by a vote of 9-1, you have approved the request to defer this item until the next formal meeting.
Okay,
That was a protest vote.
Ms. Henley, please don't tell any more of my clients to stop spending their money.
okay. All right, let's go to appointments. Mr. Vice Mayor,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board, Joseph Dreps.
do I hear any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll take that.
This never happens since I've been on council.
I don't understand.
Is there any unfinished business?
Sorry, by a vote of 8-2, you have appointed,
Oh, I didn't mean, I hit the wrong button.
Too late.
No, it's not. She can change her vote.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
so it'd be 9-1.
9-1.
Okay, is there any unfinished business? Is there any new business? We'll adjourn, but we've got public comment. Let me know when the.